Obviously, you're the author or co-author of two epic, explosive rock and roll books already. The Dirt, which is the best tell-all rock and roll book of all time, and of course, the Heroin Diaries as well. So the obvious first question is, having told so much of your story already in those two books, what made
Yeah.
you feel like you needed to go back to all the pre-Crue stuff to do
Right.
the first 21?
And there's also another book called This Is Gonna Hurt that I wrote kind of like with the concept of photography and some early messaging. We were talking about, bullying and how I was judged as a kid a lot because of how I looked. So this book actually started out with something that really bothers me. That's that musicians of any genre, actors, actresses, athletes of any, NBA, NFL, whatever, they work their whole life and then they get this big deal and they're on this team or they're in this band or they got a big hit movie and they don't know how to manage their money. So part of my concept about managing money is so that the artist can continue like when they were younger, just reckless abandon. I'm going to play basketball every day after school. I'm going to practice my guitar. I'm whatever it is. Then all of a sudden you got the pressure. You got a big hit record or two. You buy the house, you buy the cars, you buy too many cars, and it's fun and it's great. But then you get to the place where like your record doesn't work or your team doesn't win or you get traded and a lot of these people go bankrupt. It breaks my heart because I have this, like, I saved 20% net of everything I've ever made. And I wanted to write a book about that and talk about managing money for creativity. And we moved to Wyoming and I'm on the back 20 acres of my property and I'm sitting out there every day. As the crow flies, I'm only 2 hours from where I grew up in Jerome, Idaho, and Twin Falls, Idaho. And I was like going, is a book about finance right now? Like, that's probably not a very sexy book. I'll do that when I'm 72. You know what I mean? Say to all the, blah, blah, blah. It's something I would like to explore, as well as books of poetry and photography. But I remember looking at the mountains and I was like, where did everybody go? Because I took a Greyhound bus at 17 from Jerome, Idaho, 4,000 people into the belly of the beast. So I went in the house and I wrote a couplet and just basically said, it was something like, to my friends, it's not you that lost out. It's just once I started to fly, I forgot how to stop. And I was like, I want to trace from my birth to when I changed my name. It's a mic drop. There's no Motley Crue. There, of course, there's references to Motley in the book and stuff, but I really, Motley wasn't around when I was 16, 13, 17. I was learning. So that's kind of how the whole thing happened. And you're probably really glad I didn't write the finance book. You're like, that would have been boring.
Well, I will, definitely read that one. I think, but that actually brings up a good point I was going to ask. So you've always had a lot of drive. You've been, as you say in the book, the business person of your band, of Motley Crue, all the stuff that, was in the book that shows all the inroads you were making in the music business, especially with the band London before you even got in Crue. You had this drive, and the book really details a lot of the child instability you went through, which we'll get into in a moment. But, you sort of say something to the effect of, had you not gone through that stuff, maybe you wouldn't have that drive, or you wouldn't, I wonder just in general with the stuff that went on with your father, your mother, the poverty you went through. Do you think if you'd had a cushier life, like maybe all the good stuff that has happened to you since wouldn't happen because you wouldn't have had that instinct to try to make your life better?
Yeah, that's a good question. I am by nature a kind of like a documentarian. I'm constantly documenting everything around me, and it's kind of like wrangling cats in my brain. It's like, oh my God, please shut up. But I'm driving and I see something and I pull over, I take a picture of it and I write in a notepad. I always carry a notepad, a pencil or a pen, my phone in case I forget that, and a camera. And I document and I write, and that's like keeps everything flowing. So when I'm documenting my childhood, I'm definitely like, man, I had a great childhood. It was awesome. My mom was there for me, and my, you know, my perception would be different. And that venom, for some reason, of being abandoned pissed me off, man, and fired me up. And when I discovered the Dolls and Aerosmith and, you know, T-Rex, Deep Purple, I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. I remember writing in books all the time stuff that I saw. Like if I saw a fist fight at school, I would write about it, and it would be very Burrow-esque. You know, it wouldn't be like, you know, I saw two kids getting in a fight. It would be like this very colorful inroads into maybe what led to the violence. And anyway, I had, was very young. I had a stepfather that had a kind of like a flamenco gut string guitar, but there's only 3 strings on it. It was in the corner. And I just remember always, like, we were listening to Motown and heavy metal and, you know, easy listening, and, you know, Joan Baez next to Black Sabbath. That was when I was in Seattle. It was absorbing all this stuff and documenting everything that was happening around me and what I was feeling about my family. And he gave me that 3-string guitar. And he said, if you move your finger from here to here, he wasn't showing me chords. There's only 3 strings. I'm just 1 string short of being a bass player. And I remember being like, doom, 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 doom. And I started reading my notebook, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to tell stories. It's what I want to do. And then, you know, the book is about the long, hard road and determination and stuff I hopefully other people might learn from. You know, one thing I learned growing up, you know, moving around a lot, my grandmother and my grandfather, they worked their ass off to take care of us. We barely got by. We spent a lot of time in trailers, a lot of time traveling, new kid in school. So like when things like the Dolls pop up, right, or like Aerosmith's first record, you're like, oh wow, I know what I want to do, and I'm a storyteller. And then it gave me the opportunity to start exploring that in myself. And then, you know, I had to learn, obviously, to be a musician other than just that.
Well, the last time I interviewed you, which was, I believe, it was last year, it was about the activism you were doing, you know, regarding the opioid crisis. And there's a line in this book, the first 21, which I'm going to read here, that is early on in the book that really stuck with me. And you say, you might think that when you get clean, life swells up into a big bowl of cherries, but the opposite happens. When you get off drugs or whatever band-aids you've been using to cover your wounds, you start to hurt and ask the hard questions. So I'm very curious that, did you have some kind of floodgate opening once you were clean and sober? What questions were you asking? Like, did stuff that you'd sort of suppressed about your father leaving, about your childhood, just come flooding back?
It gave me an opportunity to, you know, obviously have fun in a band, you know, and write songs like Same Old Situation, which was a fun song that the record company later found out was about a girl leaving you for another girl. Doesn't sound very adventurous in 2021, but, you know, in the early 80s, that the record company was kind of like, you know, what are some of these subjects you're talking about? And Primal Scream is another example. That talks about my mom and dad and primal scream therapy, which I found through John Lennon saying he read it, and then I read it, and then that's where the lyrics come from. I got sober. We did the Dr. Feelgood album, and then we were talking about doing, you know, the follow-up record. And I remember Bob Rock calling me and says, "So what are you going to write about now, Sixx? Like everything's great." And I go, externally, but I still lay my head down in a 10,000 square foot jail cell. So I was working through it. I did so much therapy. Oh my God. I think I was a therapy junkie, but, you know, I talked to people now and they're like, man, this is going on. And I'm like, here, I got something for you, but made me a better person, you know? And this book gave me an opportunity to really look at my family and my life and maybe have some empathy. Like for my dad,
Oh,
you know, finding out that my dad left right around the time that my sister Lisa, who was born with Down syndrome, was sent to a home. And no one in my family has yet said that's why he left. But my uncle said something made Frank, my dad, made him really angry, and he left. And my part of that is, yeah, but he left me behind. So how do I have empathy, and how do I try to look at it from a 10,000 foot view instead of like, this makes my wife want to strangle me. I said, there's two ways you look at stuff. You're either a helicopter, you look down and you can decipher everything, or you're a tank and you're just on the ground and you can't see where you're going, you run off a cliff. So like, how could I be a helicopter with my family and decisions that I made? And I think there's a kind of a positive spin to this book. It's definitely not the dirt, heroin diaries. It's definitely not this is going to hurt. It's a bit of a softer read, I think, but also educational. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you ever talk to an older person, like in their 80s, and they'll tell you about like their first 21? I'm like, I will sit here all day long. And like my uncle, who's 90, he loves cars, and he can't work on cars anymore because cars are basically, you have to have a computer to work on them. But he was telling me the story of the evolution of the automobile in his life, where, I just think that you kind of, if you can listen to people that have a story, and I don't really have an angle with my story, I'm not trying to get anything out of it. I just wanted to kind of do like what my uncle did with me and said, this is kind of what happened. And, some were mistakes and some were not.
The story about your sister Lisa, the one you just mentioned, the one who had Down syndrome. I mean, you didn't know, like you never knew her. You didn't know she existed, or this was like a piece of the puzzle that you didn't put into the puzzle until well
later.
into it. Yeah.
Well, the doctor said she should not come home. I'm 2, I think. And my dad and my mom decided to bring her home and take care of her. So she was with us in San Jose, California, where I was born. My sister was born for 11 months. And, I kind of like dug into this a little bit, and I'm like, so do I have some like, could have I done something different? Could have I, but every time I talked to family members, it was like, you can't go see Lisa because it upsets her. I had like a lot of regrets around that, but I realized, I got a lot of wrong information.
Right. So
that was an opportunity in this book to clarify.
Well, I'm wondering what kind of closure or sense of peace or whatever that might have brought you, because you'd grown up your whole life thinking maybe in a more black and white, like my dad's a jerk and he left me. And then you realize it's a little more complex than that. How did you react to that? I imagine there might be part that's anger, feeling you were deceived, lied to, but maybe there was a part that kind of like was a relief at the same time.
It opened up the floodgates in a lot of ways. About 4 years ago, I was at my aunt and uncle's house, and they're like, don't have a TV on. Everyone's sitting on the coffee table, just drinking coffee. They're just their life is so simple. And I said, can I just like ask you something? My mom said, and this is my mom's sister, Harleen, said that my dad was an alcoholic and a womanizer and a drug addict, and he was a bad guy. So that's what I thought. Nobody ever contested that. And then so I asked them, I said, what was my dad like as far as these things and my uncle and my aunt go, I don't think I ever saw your dad even have a beer. I was like, boom, are you effing kidding me? And, I was not hard because I didn't want to go at it this way, but I could have just slayed my mom in this book. It's not necessary. She's passed away. God bless her. She did the best she could, I guess, in the 60s. My mom was pretty wild, had me at 17. it is what it is, man. That's my story. And turned it into, I guess I turned lemons into lemonade.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, the book ends with you changing your name. You had your father's name. You legally changed it to Nikki Sixx. That started your whole new life, your new chapter. Yeah. But it ends with you trying to reach out to your dad on the surface to ask for some money because you were in a bad spot. But as you say in the book, probably beneath that, you were also looking for connection. You find out that he has passed away.
Yeah.
Kind of a loaded question, but I imagine it's a question you've thought about. What do you think would have happened if he were still alive and he had answered the phone? Yeah. Do you think you might have been able, have you thought about like if your relationship could have been revived or if you would have found this stuff out sooner? What are your thoughts when you think about what could have been?
I think I was in an explosive time in my life. And depending on how that conversation went with, with him, it would have been like, I miss you so much. You're my son. I want to help you. I'm going to come to LA. I want to see you. I'd have been like, wow, but that conversation never happened. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure I'm sure he loved his son, but the question is, did he love me enough to go against my mom, who was challenged? Mm-hmm. So we don't know. I'm okay leaving some of these I's not dotted and T's not crossed because I don't want to make up stuff. It's okay. I think a lot of people that have talked to me after they read the book have said, man, I just so can see parts of my family in there. Or, well, what my dad did for our family and, blah, blah, blah. So I'm enjoying this because it's not a rock and roll tale. And I got to tell you, one thing that really bums me out is when bands are like, look at me, man, or like authors, I'm the greatest. And let me tell you one thing for sure. Yes, people are born great. There are guys like Bruno Mars and Prince and Jimmy Page that were just born with it, Aretha Franklin. But most of us have to work our ass off to compete with the greats. And I think some of that family stuff gave me the fire to work through the bad times, living on couches, selling light bulbs for a living, being a dishwasher, the list goes on. It's so
you sold your blood.
I sold my blood. I pawned my bass. I did anything and everything I could do to make enough money to buy equipment so I could compete. So I always, like when I talk about some of these artists that were kind of born into greatness, they too have to work. But none of us are just great. Like we don't wake up great. You have to put the work into it. And I don't like this idea of I just invented a whole genre of music. I'm like, be honest with you, yeah, but you also kind of got lucky. You kind of got lucky, and I got lucky. All of us get lucky sometimes. A door opens, you're like, I didn't even know that door was there. But if you ever quit pushing, you'll never get to that door.
Well, you're so driven, as I said earlier before. How much, if you had to do the math, you're good at math, you're good at finances and stuff. What percentage of your success would you say was luck? And what percentage of it was you making it happen?
Well, I mean, luck is a big part of it. I bet Vince Neil, I was like, luck. Tommy Lee, luck. Mick Mars just happened to answer, he put an ad in a Recycler magazine, loud, rude, aggressive guitar player. And when we called him and he came to this dilapidated house where me and Tommy were set up, just bass and drums, going through a lot of songs on Too Fast for Love, that was luck too. But the songs, they're not luck. They don't just fall out of the sky. Sometimes inspiration strikes, but I think, you got to really put the work into it. So I don't know what percentage that would be, but I'm definitely rack a lot of it up for all artists to some luck or, I don't know, you just meet the right person and they help guide you. My manager, Alan Kovac, I've been with for 27 years. We don't even have a contract together. We
Wow.
just love working and making stuff happen. Books, musicals, movies, albums, tours. So yeah, I got lucky when I met him too.
Bit of a cliched question, but given your drive and given the stuff you'd been through and your dream of coming out here to LA and all that, did you kind of just know deep down that it was going to work? Because you obviously went through a lot of stuff, selling your blood and stuff. To like, did you kind of know you'd eventually be a rock star?
You like that blood part.
It's kind of goth. I kind of
It's
like
kind of
it.
goth. It is for
Kinda
sure a
goth.
little goth.
Mm-hmm.
You know the term blind faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had nothing to go back to. I mean, now I realize I had family and stuff, but I'm in the belly of the beast. I'm in Hollywood, California. I'm studying other bands. I'm listening to records. I'm taking their chord progressions, turning them around. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm doing all the work, booking gigs, stage clothes, set designs. That was all during the London part. But I never thought. I remember when the thing came up that Van Halen had come and gone. And Quiet Riot was like the big band on the Strip with Randy Rhoads. And London was coming up. And we had this singer, Nigel Benjamin, that had like a 5-octave range. He reminded me when he wanted to of a little of like a Freddie Mercury. This guy had a voice, man. I can't believe it. And we were writing these kind of pop 70s rock stuff. And, no one wanted to sign us, because we weren't doing what everybody else was doing. And I was just like, every record company that passed, I would like go, okay, guys, they passed. Does it change that we're really doing good? And, it was the moment, again, you talk about luck, that Capitol Records passed on us.
Mm-hmm.
So just to do the math, my uncle was the president of Capitol Records, and Motley Crue sold 150 million records, and record companies make, I'll just call it $10 a record. It was a $1.5 billion mistake. But I didn't think about it like that. I was just like, got to keep going. And when Nigel quit because Capitol passed, there was no option for me. There was no option. Like, so I wasn't, people were saying that London was the next Queen, Bowie, that T-Rex. Like, we had all those things, hence the name London. And our singer was British.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you're young like that, and I think it's important to just keep going. Like, you're going to trip and fall. You're going to have bad luck. You're going to have good luck. You just got to keep doing the work. Just keep doing the work. And, we all hope that is the driver for how great you are when you do get it. So, people are like, yeah, man, these rock stars, they just roll out of bed. They look good. They just show up and play. And wow, they have a whole set full of hit songs. Bullshit. Bullshit. None of this just fell out of the sky and landed in my band's lap or in London's lap or in 6 a.m.'s lap. You got to put the work in. Well, that's what I probably got working on farms. I didn't believe it or not.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's something I've actually talked about with some of they're a little bit later than you. I wouldn't say they're your direct peers, but they're from the same general era. When I've talked to, say, Slash and Duff McKagan, when I've talked to Bret Michaels, that era of LA and the Sunset Strip and hard rock, like whether people like that music or not, some people don't, that's not their thing. No one can say that these bands didn't work their asses off and work hard, whether it was the flyering, the pay to play, the constant gigging. Like, the work ethic of these bands is something I've never seen in any other scene. And I imagine, like, you agree with me or you have thoughts on that.
I mean, you're out there and you're pushing your agenda. You're like, this is what we look like. This is what our flyers look like. This is our gig. No one will sign us. I read a lot of books on distribution, on the music law, so I wouldn't get ripped off. We started our own record company. We're pushing, and then right down the street, there's another band. They're like, look what Motley's doing. They're pushing too, and a bit of a friendly rivalry in a sense. We get asked a lot about the 80s, And, we came out in 81, January 17th, 1981. By 82, we were on tour, going up down the West Coast and opening for Kiss as well. And then we did our second record and immediately got the Ozzy Osbourne tour and never came home again. So in 83, 84, people are talking about the Sunset Strip. Hey, Nikki, what was the Sunset Strip like in 85 or 87? And I'll be honest with you, I kind of don't know.
Yeah, you were gone already.
Well, we were focused on what we worked on.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, I wanted to ask a little more about the family stuff, but bringing it to the present. So, in the book, you talk about how you feel you may have inherited your father's coldness or what you perceived to be his coldness at the time. And you based on the information you had, and that, you were a bit concerned you might kind of perpetuate that cycle, pass it down. But, from all I've ever observed, you've always been a very involved and loving father. And and you recently became a father again. So congratulations on that.
I love it.
So I'm curious about how you did break that cycle, given that you had this, for lack of a better word, baggage from your own experience with your father. How, that is a very common thing. If someone's been abused or neglected,
Pass
it
it
happens. How did you not?
Sobriety changed my life. It opened a lot of doors for me. And there were more doors that included work. It's like, oh my God, I've been tired since I'm 13. All I do is work and I love it. But, when you get sober, well, I got to look at that. And I need to kind of look at that because I didn't want to carry that forward. And, I wish for people that are struggling that they could let go and try. I always say to some friends that have struggled or are struggling, just give your life to sobriety for one solid year. Do all the hard work, do the therapy, whatever it takes, and you will be amazed at what your life turns out to be. It's just like, am I going to practice my bass? And then one day it's like, oh, wow, like I opened another door. I remember recently I started playing with my fingers just for me and doing like some really interesting, different kind of bass playing. Hard work, sobriety, hard work, marriage, hard work, being a dad, hard work. If you're afraid of hard work, I don't know how far you're going to get.
See, I think you're kind of an anomaly. I mean, I'm not saying I don't want to subscribe to rock and roll cliches, but as you mentioned at the top of this interview with some people who haven't been as savvy with their finances or whatever, like not every rocker, for lack of a better word, has this work ethic. Like some people just want to have it be sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but you've always had this. Where do you think it came from? Is it from the farm?
Yeah, I think it was from, you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you jump in the back of a pickup truck with a bunch of labor workers, and you're out there moving irrigation pipe with mud up to your ass, and that's not what you want to do, but that when you move irrigation pipe, at least back then, you get paid by the line. So like from the top to the bottom. So if you can knock out 2, you get paid twice as much or 3. So like I would be like always trying to make more money because I wanted to buy stuff that would get me amps and guitars and stuff like that. And that's pretty innocent. But yeah, the hard work is there. I love hard work. I love when I work with people that are open and they can talk about, when I work with James Michael, because, we write almost all the lyrics in 6 a.m. We will, I remember we were working on this song on the last album. I think it's called Wolf at the Door. And it was about depression. Like the wolf, if you've ever dealt with depression, you just wake up on a Tuesday and you're like, oh man, something's off. And by Wednesday, the wolf's at the door. And, with James, I'm able to tackle things like skin and life is beautiful. And with me and James and DJ musically, we were like a little like 3 amigos almost. We spent all of our time together and just created, but a lot of it was out of conversation. I'd go to James's house for a songwriting session, or maybe to like redo a bass part or something. And we would talk for hour and a half, 2 hours. And then we would write the lyrics in like 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Because we talk, we communicate. Artists need to communicate.
Absolutely. You mentioned that when you're talking to friends who might be in a difficult place, you say, just try sobriety for a year and you'll be amazed. When
Yeah.
you tried it and it stuck,
Mhm.
and you stayed, what were you most amazed by?
The clarity was one of the greatest things. We were like, I don't know, for like a decade, like I'd roll out of bed with a hangover and be grumpy and, get through my day and then start drinking again at 5 and have a blast and wake up the next day. So, the sobriety gave me clarity. With clarity, you can see. And when you can see, you're like, oh, look at that thing over there. Maybe I
Mm.
should write about that. Maybe I should discuss that in a book. Maybe I should, so it opened those doors I was talking about, which I love. When you're clouded by alcoholism or drug addiction, you could be in a room with 25 doors and everybody's on the other side of the door going, come on, man, like open the door, but you can't see it. And that's what happened for me and my friends who've gotten sober. They're like, oh my God, all this like these amazing opportunities, whether they're in relationships or a closer connection to their band, their songwriting, how their body feels,
Mm-hmm.
so that's what it was for me.
So I'm wondering how you feel about this cliche that exists that, the best art uh, comes from pain or depression or dark times because, you said you got sober after Dr. Feelgood, right? Is that
I
what you
got
said?
I got sober right before Dr. Feelgood.
Okay. Well, obviously,
The whole band was sober for that.
but obviously when you guys were not sober, you still put out a lot of great music, got a lot of stuff done, had a lot of success, had a lot of hits. And there are people that think like, oh, when a band gets sober or when a person is now in a happy place, they're happily married, have kids and whatever, that they no longer have anything, as you mentioned, to write about, or that they no longer make their best art. And it's a cliche. Maybe for some people it's actually true, but I'm curious about your thoughts on it.
Well, I think that cliche is spat into our internet world by guys that live in their mom's basement. They're like, well, Metallica, man, after the Black Album, I'm out. And I'm like,
Mm.
what are you talking about? That album is amazing top to bottom. I know so much about that record because they used Bob Rock, who produced Dr. Feelgood. Those guys worked their ass off. Let me tell you something about Metallica. We did a show, Rock in Rio, down the road 4 or 5 years ago. And it was Motley Crue and Metallica. We were, it was a festival. So they were headlining, we were next. And they rolled in and, everybody said hi and everything. And they went back to this room. Now we're getting ready to go on stage. And all I hear is them rehearsing in their dressing room. And then I was like, look at the dedication on these dudes, man. It wasn't like, I don't feel like it. It was like, no, this is what we do. We're Metallica and we're going to be the best that we can be. So they go on stage and James says, here's a song we haven't played in 15 years. Here's a song we haven't played in 7 years. We just worked it up. And I was like, that's why they're great.
Mm.
They don't just settle. And I love bands that like that, And yeah, the angst, it's there's a song called Bastard on Shout at the Devil. And I think it says, in goes my knife, out comes your life. Consider that bastard dead. Yeah, I was pissed. I was pissed. And when I'm pissed, I do have a sort of venom, but sometimes I want to go out at a different angle. A lot of people don't realize, and I was vague about it, just because it just didn't really feel like I wanted to divulge too much. But Livewire was a lot of stuff was floating around in my head about the domestic violence that was happening when I lived with my dad, my stepdad, and my mom, and I would get beat and stuff too.
Mm.
So even lines like hot, young, running free, a little bit better than I used to be was a see you later. And some of the lyrics in the verse, you're like, oh, I get it. I was pissed, but Home Sweet Home, I wasn't pissed. I think the band had been on the road so long, with Shout at the Devil. I think it was an 18-month tour. And we were writing these songs. And I had this little acoustic thing that I'd been playing since I was 17. Like I said, I'm not a great guitar player. And it was just like ding, 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 ding. And I said, Tommy, can you play this on piano? And he's like, da, 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 da. And I'm like, I'm a dreamer, like opening line, because we are. Like I like to think that there's Frank. There's a Frank is a dreamer in all of us. And then I created a clothing line just recently called 6 on 6. We're doing all this Frank stuff. It's just fun. It's a fun thing to do, but I kind of lost my train of thought there, but
no, it's a good train. I'm on the train.
You're on the train?
I'm just taking the ride with you. But actually, I do have a question that is interesting. It's an unusual situation for the leads. I guess I'm imagining most of the time the lead singer is the one who writes the lyrics.
Right.
There are some exceptions like Motley Crue, like Fall Out Boy. But you talked about communication being so important in a band when you were talking about 6 a.m. When you were presenting these songs or these lyrics to Vince or whoever, like for instance, Livewire, like did Vince know when he's singing Livewire in his own voice, what it actually is about? Like, did you have those conversations?
I mean, I never really, because I didn't really even divulge this until like 5 years ago, that there's elements. I'm not going to say it's a domestic violence, outcry. Right. I'm not going to say that. I'm just saying, I was telling you earlier, I document everything. So sometimes it's like, oh, wow, I remember that. And that really affected me. So I want to write that. With Motley Crue, Vince has this amazing, unique voice. Sometimes like Robert Plant, Perry Farrell, they have these interesting voices they're not pitchy. They're just raw and just kind of on top. And I always loved that about Vince's voice. And I would write for Vince. Vince will tell you, Nikki wrote all those lyrics for me. I did. And I gave him stuff. I'm like, I understand his voice so much. When we're doing demos, like I'll sit in the studio with Tommy and we will get it so that sounds like this song. He delivers it. He owns it. So one of the things he sometimes says, like, I write too many lyrics in a short period of time. Like Shout at the Devil's a great example. But like we work through it, and he's got this thing, and I'm, I've worked with a lot of singers that have like huge vocal ranges, and they take vocal lessons, they warm up, they warm down. And then there's guys, that just like, Vince warms up, does his thing, but he just goes out. And I got lucky. I got a guy with like a really different voice, which imagine if he was like a bluesy singer, right? If he was a David Coverdale, who I love David. I love his voice. Or Glenn Hughes, some of my favorite people and favorite musicians. Could he deliver Bastard? Could he deliver Dropping Like Flies? Like, could he deliver Generation Swine? I don't know. I'll never know. But I do love that about Motley Crue. It's like we all kind of four individually, I don't know. We're just like, it's almost like we don't belong together. We're like all so weird and different, and it makes for some really interesting magic.
Well, that brings me, I know I need to wrap it up, but it brings me to my last question and brings it back into the present. So you actually say in the book at the very beginning, kind of in the intro to the first 21, you address the fact that, a few years ago, 5 years ago or so, it seemed like Motley Crue was over. You did the farewell tour, you signed the contract. The Dirt, not the book, but the movie, the Netflix movie, The Dirt, sort of reopened that. And you said you really plan to call quits, but you're quote unquote a man ruled by your passions. Obviously, there is a tour that's been delayed a bunch of times, but is in the works. But, you address the fact that you've had a lot of issues in the 40 years since the first album. But what is the future for Motley Crue in terms of more new music?
Mhm.
You know, is again with using the word floodgates. Is it back on in earnest, like
I
new
mean,
album, whatever?
yeah, well, no, because we just did like, what was it, 5 new songs with the
Mm-hmm.
Dirt soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Funny story about that. I was kind of woodshedding, and then I was writing with John Five, and I was just getting some ideas that I thought might be good to show the band. And Sahaj Tikatone, who's the singer in Raw, he's a great producer. I went over and we just kind of mapped out some songs, right? And Sahaj can sing great, and he would sing it like Vince. And so um, I was like, maybe the guys will want to do a new song called "The Dirt." So there was 8 songs, all called "The Dirt," right? All called "The Dirt" because I was trying to write a song for a movie called "The Dirt." Like I wouldn't do it, and I would write a song called, something else.
Mm-hmm.
So the label, after the band heard them and was like, "Wow, we really like these 5 or 6, whatever it was." And then the label says to me, which is my manager, Alan Kovac. So uh, he probably like slapped me for this, but he says, because these songs are really great, but we can't have 6 songs on the Dirt soundtrack all called "The Dirt." Like no one's going to know which song is "The Dirt." And I said, so rewrite all the choruses. And I think, this is going to be great and fans are going to love it. So I went to the studio and I changed all the titles of the songs. One was I can't remember. We were so fast. The devil. I don't know. Uh, so when it all came out, everyone was so excited that they had these songs. But each song does mention the dirt in it. So if you ever listen to those songs, it was just me going, I'm not going to change. I'm just going to change the title, right?
Well, are those, to answer my question, obviously you're feeling prolific these days, so
Don't know. I don't know. Right now, we thought we were going to tour this year.
yeah,
Then the Delta variant came,
yep.
and some of my friends went out and did it, and some have had no problems, some have had big problems. On a business level, you can't get COVID insurance.
Mm.
So if you've got a big show, Motley, Def Leppard, Poison, Joan Jett, that's generating a lot. That show goes down because somebody, whatever. So you just lose money, and you can only lose so many shows, and then you're basically on tour for free. So we chose to stay back, waiting to see what kind of how like AGs and Live Nations and how other bands were going to handle it. And I think we made the right decision. So we restart designing the show in April. It's basically designed, but there's some new technology that happened in the last few years we might want to involve. And then we've already got our set, like it's done. So it's not like we have to have that meeting where it's like, I want to play this song. I want to play this song. Like everybody agreed on these songs, and it's a really cool set. And there's some medleys in it. And we start band rehearsals in May, which I don't know what that looks like. We like to rehearse for 3 or 4 weeks. Even if we like have 4 weeks and we're pretty tight, at 3 weeks, sometimes you lose a day here or there. A guy gets sick, someone car breaks down. So we always 4 weeks. And then we go to Atlanta where the tour opens, and we do pre-production with everybody on the bill and set the show up and tear the show down so it all fits. And then June 19th, I think the tour starts, and I can't wait. My friends are still like Corey from Slipknot told me, and when he was doing his like solo thing, he's like, I've never seen the crowds go so crazy. Duff told me the same thing the other day. Like crowds are like losing it because everybody's dying for it. So we're going to be as safe as we can be, and
then maybe new music. You didn't answer my question, but
because we're not there yet.
But maybe your mind's open to it.
Yeah, I mean, I did the new 6 a.m. songs. I did the LA Rats project. I don't know if you ever heard that. Working on this book. Yep. And now it's like kind of like I'm going to promote the book for the next, 4 weeks, and then I'm going to give take a vacation because I'm tired all the time.
You've been tired since you were 13.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Maybe I think I was more tired back then. So then we get into like the beginning of the year, and then we'll kind of start talking about it. But then rehearsals start just a couple months later. So if there was going to be new music, I would assume it would be something around, we're going to go do this tour next year. Let's see what 23 looks like. Do they still want us in South America, Australia, Japan? Maybe we'll knock out a couple songs. We just don't. I don't know. I'm not that planned in the future. I've been writing some interesting stuff that's very first Motley Crue album.
Ooh.
So it's kind of interesting. Yeah.